The screen fades in from black, and the first thing you hear is the sound of raindrops hitting the pavement. It's not just any rain. It's one of those relentless downpours that seem to echo the weight of the world. The camera pans slowly across a bustling city street where umbrellas bob like colorful buoys in a stormy sea. People rush past, heads bowed, shoulders hunched, their faces obscured by scarves or collars pulled up against the cold. But then the camera lingers on one figure, a woman standing at a crosswalk, her umbrella forgotten in her hand, water dripping off its edges as she hesitates mid-step. Her name is Sarah, though we don't know that yet. All we see is her face, pale but determined, framed by damp strands of dark hair clinging to her cheeks. She's holding something tightly in her other hand, a crumpled bill slightly torn at the corner. The camera zooms in subtly, focusing. On the way, her fingers tremble ever so slightly as they grip the money. You can almost feel the weight of what this moment means to her. Is it rent, groceries, or maybe something more urgent? As the light turns green, Sarah steps forward, her shoes splashing through puddles. The camera follows her movements closely, capturing every detail, the way her coat flaps open in the wind, revealing a worn-out sweater underneath, the faint smudge of dirt on her sleeve, the slight limp in her gait, suggesting she's been on her feet all day. These small details paint a picture of someone who has seen hardship, someone who carries burdens heavier than most would care to imagine, and then she stops, abruptly. Her gaze locks onto something, or rather someone, across the street. The camera shifts perspective, showing us what she sees. A man sitting alone on a park bench, his posture slouched, his clothes plain and threadbare. His face is partially hidden beneath the brim of a faded baseball cap, but even from this distance, there's something about him that feels different. Not pitiable exactly, but deeply weary, as if he's carrying a sadness too heavy for words. Sarah hesitates again, biting her lower lip. Her eyes dart around, scanning the scene as if searching for some kind of confirmation, or perhaps an excuse to turn away. But she doesn't move. Instead, she takes a deep breath, squares her shoulders, and crosses the street. Each step seems deliberate, measured, as though she's fighting an internal battle with every movement. When she finally reaches the bench, the camera stays low, framing the interaction from below, emphasizing the intimacy of the moment. "Here?" she says softly, extending the crumpled bill toward him. Her voice is barely audible over the rain, but the sincerity in her tone cuts through the noise. For a split second, the man looks up, his eyes meeting hers. They're sharp, piercing, almost unnervingly so, given the context. He doesn't say anything at first, just stares at her, as if trying to decipher some hidden meaning behind her gesture. Then, slowly, he nods, reaching out to take the money. His fingers brush against hers briefly, and for a fleeting moment, it feels like time stands still, cut to black. Silence. And then a voice begins to speak, calm, reflective, inviting. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we could never predict. A single choice, made in the blink of an eye, can alter destinies, uncover truths, and remind us of the fragile beauty of humanity. The screen remains dark for a beat longer, letting the words sink in. Then the title appears in bold white. Letters against the black background. She gave him money for the bus, not knowing he was a millionaire. Before diving deeper into the story, let's pause here for a moment. If you're enjoying this journey so far, consider subscribing to our channel. We create stories like this one, deep, thought-provoking, and filled with unexpected twists, to inspire and connect with viewers like you. Hit that subscribe button now and join us as we explore the layers of this remarkable tale. Now, let's transition seamlessly into the next part of the story. Who is this woman, Sarah? What drives her to make such a selfless decision in the middle of her own struggles? And who exactly is the mysterious man on the bench? To answer these questions, we need to go back to the beginning of Sarah's story, where everything starts to make sense. To truly understand Sarah, we must rewind the clock, not just days or weeks, but years. Her life has been a tapestry of resilience, woven together with threads of sacrifice, love, and an unyielding determination to provide for her family. Let's peel back the layers of who she is, piece by piece, until the full picture emerges. Sarah grew up in a small town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a place where everyone knew everyone else's name, but opportunities were scarce. Her father worked long hours at the local factory, while her mother juggled odd jobs to make ends meet. From a young age, Sarah learned the value of hard work. She babysat neighborhood kids, delivered newspapers before dawn, and helped her parents stretch every dollar as far as it could go. It wasn't easy, but there was always laughter around the dinner table, even if the meals were humble. But life had other plans. When Sarah was 16, her father lost his job after the factory downsized. The financial strain tore through their family like a storm, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Her parents argued more often, their voices muffled behind closed doors, though Sarah could still hear them late at night. She began skipping school dances and Friday night football games to pick up extra shifts at the diner downtown. By the time she graduated high school, she had already taken on the role of caretaker, not just for herself, but for her younger siblings too. Fast forward 2 decades, and Sarah finds herself standing at another crossroads. Now 40 years old, she is a single mother raising 2 teenagers, Emma, 15, and Jake, 17. Her ex-husband left when the kids were toddlers, citing irreconcilable differences, though Sarah suspects it had more to do with his inability to handle responsibility. Since then, she's shouldered the burden alone, working double shifts. As a nurse's aide during the day and cleaning offices at night, her hands are calloused from years of scrubbing floors and changing bedpans, but her smile remains warm, even when exhaustion threatens to consume her. The camera lingers on Sarah's face during these quieter moments, when she's sitting at the kitchen table after midnight, sipping lukewarm coffee while balancing bills on a calculator. There's a weariness in her eyes, yes, but also a quiet strength. She doesn't complain about the sleepless nights or the constant worry gnawing at the edges of her mind. Instead, she focuses on what matters most, giving her children a better life than the one she had. One particular memory haunts her, though she rarely speaks of it aloud. It happened when she was 22, fresh out of community college and desperate for a job. She'd been evicted from her apartment and spent weeks couch surfing with friends until they couldn't help anymore. One bitterly cold winter night, she found herself huddled in an alleyway, clutching a thin blanket around her shoulders. A stranger, an older woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice, approached her and handed her a $20 bill. "Get yourself something warm to eat," the woman said simply before walking away. That moment changed everything for Sarah, not because of the money itself, but because of the humanity behind it. Someone had seen her pain and chosen to act, without judgment or expectation. In that instant, Sarah vowed to pay it forward someday, no matter how difficult her own circumstances became. And so, over the years, she made it a point to help others whenever she could, whether it was buying groceries for a struggling neighbor, donating clothes to a shelter, or simply listening to someone who needed to be heard. Now, let's return to the present day. Sarah's decision to give that crumpled bill to the man on the bench wasn't impulsive. It was rooted in a lifetime of experiences that shaped her worldview. But here's the thing. This act of kindness came at a cost. Earlier that morning, she had received yet another medical bill for Jake's ongoing treatment. He suffers from asthma, and the medication isn't cheap. Every penny counts, and yet she chose to part with what little she had. As the rain continues to fall, the camera cuts to a brief flashback. We see Sarah sitting in a doctor's office, clutching the bill in trembling hands. The receptionist's voice echoes faintly in the background. "If you can't pay within 30 days, there will be penalties." Sarah nods silently, forcing a tight-lipped smile as she thanks the receptionist and leaves. Outside, she leans against a wall, closing her eyes as tears threaten to spill over. This is the weight she carries daily, the fear of falling short, of not being enough. Yet, despite all this, she walked across that street and gave that money away. Why? because deep down, Sarah believes in the power of connection. She knows what it feels like to be invisible, to feel as though the world has forgotten you exist, and she refuses to let anyone else feel that way, not if she can help it. Let's pause here for a moment. If Sarah's story resonates with you, if you've ever felt the pressure of carrying the world on your shoulders, consider subscribing to our channel. Stories like hers remind us that we're not alone, that there's beauty in vulnerability and strength in compassion. Hit that subscribe button now, and stay tuned as we delve deeper into the mystery surrounding the man on the bench. Now that we've peeled Sarah grew up in a small town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a place where everyone knew everyone else's name, but opportunities were scarce. Her father worked long hours at the local factory, while her mother juggled odd jobs to make ends meet. From a young age, Sarah learned the value of hard work. She babysat neighborhood kids, delivered newspapers before dawn, and helped her parents stretch every dollar as far as it could go. It wasn't easy, but there was always laughter around the dinner table, even if the meals were humble. But life had other plans. When Sarah was 16, her father lost his job after the factory downsized. The financial strain tore through their family like a storm, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Her parents argued more often, their voices muffled behind closed doors, though Sarah could still hear them late at night. She began skipping school dances and Friday night football games to pick up extra shifts at the diner downtown. By the time she graduated high school, she had already taken on the role of caretaker, not just for herself, but for her younger siblings too. Fast forward 2 decades, and Sarah finds herself standing at another crossroads. Now 40 years old, she is a single mother raising 2 teenagers, Emma, 15, and Jake, 17. Her ex-husband left when the kids were toddlers, citing irreconcilable differences, though Sarah suspects it had more to do with his inability to handle responsibility. Since then, she's shouldered the burden alone, working double shifts as a nurse's aide during the day and cleaning offices at night. Her hands are calloused from years of scrubbing floors and changing bedpans, but her smile remains warm even when exhaustion threatens to consume her. The camera lingers on Sarah's face during these quieter moments, when she's sitting at the kitchen table after midnight, sipping lukewarm coffee while balancing bills on a calculator. There's a weariness in her eyes, yes, but also a quiet strength. She doesn't complain about the sleepless nights or the constant worry gnawing at the edges of her mind. Instead, she focuses on what matters most, giving her children a better life than the one she had. One particular memory haunts her, though she rarely speaks of it aloud. It happened when she was 22, fresh out of community college and desperate for a job. She'd been evicted from her apartment and spent weeks couch surfing with friends until they couldn't help anymore. One bitterly cold winter night, she found herself huddled in an alleyway, clutching a thin blanket around her shoulders. A stranger, an older woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice, approached her and handed her a $20 bill. "Get yourself something warm to eat," the woman said simply, before walking away. That moment changed everything for Sarah, not because of the money itself, but because of the humanity behind it. Someone had seen her pain and chosen to act without judgment or expectation. In that instant, Sarah vowed to pay it forward someday, no matter how difficult her own circumstances became. And so, over the years, she made it a point to help others whenever she could, whether it was buying groceries for a struggling neighbor, donating clothes to a shelter, or simply listening to someone who needed to be heard. Now, let's return to the present day. Sarah's decision to give that crumpled bill to the man on the bench wasn't impulsive. It was rooted in a lifetime of experiences that shaped her worldview. But here's the thing. This act of kindness came at a cost. Earlier that morning, she had received yet another medical bill for Jake's ongoing treatment. He suffers from asthma, and the medication isn't cheap. Every penny counts. And yet, she chose to part with what little she had. As the rain continues to fall, the camera cuts to a brief flashback. We see Sarah sitting in a doctor's office, clutching the bill in trembling hands. The receptionist's voice echoes faintly in the background. "If you can't pay within 30 days, there will be penalties. Sarah nods silently, forcing a tight-lipped smile as she thanks the receptionist and leaves. Outside, she leans against a wall, closing her eyes as tears threaten to spill over. This is the weight she carries daily, the fear of falling short, of not being enough. Yet, despite all this, she walked across that street and gave that money away. Why? Because deep down, Sarah believes in the power of connection. She knows what it feels like to be invisible, to feel as though the world has forgotten you exist. And she refuses to let anyone else feel that way. Not if she can help it. Ed back the layers of Sarah's life, it's time to turn our attention to the man on the bench, the enigmatic figure who accepted her gesture with quiet gratitude. His name is Thomas, and while he may appear unassuming at first glance, his story is anything but ordinary. To understand him fully, we must journey into the depths of his past, where shadows linger and secrets fester. Thomas was born into privilege. From the moment he entered the world, his life was mapped out for him: prestigious schools, lucrative internships, a corner office waiting at the end of the road. His father, a self-made millionaire, instilled in him the importance of ambition and success. The world doesn't reward weakness, his father would often say during their rare moments together. You have to fight for what you want, even if it means stepping on others to get there. By all accounts, Thomas excelled. He graduated top of his class from an Ivy League university, launched a tech startup that skyrocketed in value, and became one of the youngest CEOs in the industry. By the age of 35, he was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Mansions, private jets, luxury cars. It seemed as though he had everything anyone could ever dream of. But beneath the polished exterior lay a man hollowed out by the very success he had chased so relentlessly. The camera transitions to a series of flashbacks, each more opulent than the last. We see Thomas standing on a yacht surrounded by champagne, glasses and laughter, yet his smile never reaches his eyes. In another scene, he sits alone in a sprawling penthouse apartment, staring out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The room is immaculate, devoid of personal touches, a reflection of the emptiness inside him. Despite his wealth, he feels disconnected, adrift in a sea of superficial relationships and meaningless achievements. But then came the tragedy that would shatter his carefully constructed world. It happened on a rainy night, much like the one Sarah encountered him. Ironic, isn't it? Thomas, his wife Emily, and their 8-year-old son Liam were driving home from a family vacation when a drunk driver crossed into their lane. The crash was catastrophic. Emily and Liam didn't survive. Thomas walked away with minor injuries, but the emotional scars ran far deeper. For months afterward, he spiraled into a dark abyss of guilt and grief. How could he have survived when they hadn't? Why had fate spared him, only to leave him utterly alone? He tried therapy, medication, even retreats in remote locations, but nothing could fill the void left by their absence. Eventually, he came to a devastating realization. His relentless pursuit of wealth and status had blinded him to what truly mattered: love, connection, humanity. And so, he made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. He sold his company, liquidated his assets, and donated most of his fortune to charity. What little remained, he kept hidden in offshore accounts, accessible only in emergencies. Then, he disappeared from public life altogether, adopting a new identity and living among the very people he once overlooked. For the past 15 years, he has wandered from city to city, observing the struggles of ordinary people and grappling with his own demons. The camera lingers on Thomas as he sits on that park bench, rain soaking through his threadbare jacket. His face is lined with age and sorrow, but there's also a glimmer of something else, curiosity perhaps, or a faint hope that he might still find redemption. He watches the world around him with keen eyes, noting the kindness of strangers, the resilience of those facing adversity, and the quiet beauty of everyday moments. Yet despite his efforts to blend in, he remains an outsider, a ghost haunting the periphery of human connection. When Sarah approached him that day, he wasn't expecting anything, not gratitude, not recognition, certainly not generosity. People rarely gave without expecting something in return, especially not to someone like him. But Sarah's act struck a chord deep within him. Here was a woman who clearly had little to spare, yet she chose to share what she had with a stranger. It reminded him of the humanity he had lost sight of in his former life, the same humanity he now sought to reclaim. As the rain continues to fall, the camera zooms in on Thomas's expression. There is a flicker of emotion in his eyes. Gratitude, yes, but also pain. Pain because he knows he can never repay her kindness, not in the way she deserves. And yet, in that moment, he resolves to do something meaningful with the second chance he's been given. Let's pause here for a moment. If Thomas's journey resonates with you, if you've ever questioned the true cost of success or wondered how to find purpose after loss, consider subscribing to our channel. Stories like his remind us that it's never too late to change, to seek forgiveness, and to rediscover what truly matters. Hit that subscribe button now and stay tuned as we explore the profound impact of this seemingly simple encounter between two strangers. The moment when Sarah handed that crumpled bill to Thomas was more than just a fleeting interaction. It was the collision of two worlds, two lives shaped by vastly different experiences, yet bound together by an unspoken understanding. To fully appreciate the weight of this encounter, we need to delve deeper into the nuances of their exchange, exploring not only what happened, but also what it meant for both of them. As Sarah stood there in the rain, her hand extended toward Thomas, she felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. On one hand, there was relief, a sense that she had done the right thing, even if it left her own pockets emptier. But on the other hand, there was doubt. Was this man truly in need? Would her small contribution make any real difference? These questions gnawed at her as she watched him take the money, his fingers brushing against hers ever so slightly. For Thomas, the touch was electric, not because of its physical sensation, but because of the humanity it carried. In all his years of wandering, he had encountered countless people who turned away, who judged him based on appearances or dismissed him as unworthy of their attention. But Sarah didn't hesitate. She saw him not as a wealthy man hiding in plain sight, not as a symbol of failure or regret, but simply as another human being deserving of compassion. The camera captures this moment with painstaking detail. As Sarah steps back, her umbrella tilting slightly as she adjusts her grip, Thomas looks up at her again. This time his eyes are softer, less guarded. He opens his mouth as if to say something, but no words come out. Instead, he nods once, a gesture of silent gratitude that speaks volumes. Sarah offers a faint smile before turning to leave, her footsteps splashing through puddles as she disappears into the crowd. But the encounter doesn't end there. For both of them, it lingers like the aftertaste of something bittersweet. As Sarah walks away, her mind races with thoughts of Jake's medical bills and the sacrifices she'll have to make to cover them. Yet, amidst the anxiety, there's a flicker of pride, a reminder that she stayed true to the values instilled in her by that kind stranger all those years ago. She may not have much, but she still has her integrity, her ability to give without expecting anything in return. Meanwhile, Thomas remained seated on the bench, staring at the damp bill in his hand. The camera zooms in on his face, capturing the subtle shifts in his expression as he processes what just happened. At first, there's disbelief. How could someone like Sarah, clearly struggling herself, part with something so precious? Then comes admiration, followed by a pang of guilt. He knows he doesn't deserve her kindness, not after everything he's done or failed to do in his life. This internal conflict drives Thomas to reflect on his own journey. Over the years, he has observed countless acts of selfishness, greed, and indifference. People hoarding wealth while others starve, families torn apart by ambition, communities fractured by mistrust. And yet, here was Sarah, a woman who embodied the very qualities he had abandoned in pursuit of success: empathy, selflessness, resilience. The camera cuts to a series of flashbacks interwoven with present-day scenes. We see Thomas sitting in coffee shops watching as a young mother comforts her crying child. In another scene, he stands on a street corner observing a group of teenagers. sharing laughter and snacks despite their tattered clothes. Each moment reinforces his growing realization. The world is full of beauty, if only you know where to look. And Sarah's act of kindness serves as a stark reminder of the goodness that still exists, even in the darkest corners of society. Back in the present, Thomas folds the bill carefully and tucks it into his pocket. He rises from the bench, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. For the first time in years, he feels a spark of purpose, a desire to honor Sarah's gesture in some way. But how? What can he possibly do to repay her, to acknowledge the magnitude of what she has given him? As the rain begins to ease, the camera follows Thomas as he wanders through the city streets. His thoughts drift to the fortune he left behind, the money hidden away in offshore accounts untouched for over a decade. Could he use it to help people like Sarah? To create opportunities for those struggling to survive? The idea takes root in his mind, growing stronger with each passing second. The story reaches its crescendo as the threads of Sarah's kindness and Thomas's internal turmoil begin to weave together, culminating in a revelation that will alter both their lives forever. This is where the narrative takes its most dramatic turn, a moment of truth that challenges everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. Days pass after their encounter in the rain. Sarah returns to her routine, juggling work shifts, caring for her children, and grappling with the mounting pressure of unpaid bills. She tries not to dwell on the money she gave away, but it lingers in the back of her mind like an unresolved web cord. Meanwhile, Thomas becomes increasingly consumed by the memory of Sarah's gesture. He can't shake the image of her face, the determination in her eyes, the slight tremble in her hand as she offered him that crumpled bill. It haunts him, not because of guilt, but because it represents something he has spent years searching for: authenticity. One evening, as Sarah sits at the kitchen table poring over yet another medical invoice, she notices an envelope tucked beneath the mail slot in her front door. At first glance, it seems ordinary, a plain white envelope with no return address, but something about it feels off. Her name is written neatly on the front in black ink, and when she opens it, she finds a single sheet of paper inside. The owl message is brief, almost cryptic. Ms. Sarah Thompson, please meet me at the address below tomorrow at noon. Your presence is requested for a matter of great importance. Sincerely, T.W. The address listed belongs to a sprawling estate on the outskirts of town, a place Sarah has only seen in passing, its wrought iron gates and manicured lawns, a stark contrast to her modest neighborhood. Confusion washes over her as she reads the note again, her heart pounding with equal parts curiosity and apprehension. Who could this T.W. be, and why would anyone want to see her? The camera captures Sarah's reaction in intimate detail, her furrowed brow, the way her fingers trace the edges of the paper as if searching for hidden meaning. She debates whether to ignore the invitation, dismissing it as some kind of prank or scam, but something compels her to go. Perhaps it's the tone of the letter, formal yet oddly sincere, or maybe it's the faint hope that this mysterious summons might somehow ease the weight pressing down on her shoulders. The next day, Sarah arrives at the address, her car rattling slightly as she pulls up to the gate. A security guard greets her, checking her name against a list before allowing her to proceed. As she drives along the winding driveway, the mansion comes into view, a towering structure of glass and stone, surrounded by lush gardens and fountains. The juxtaposition between this opulence and her own humble reality is staggering, and for a moment she considers turning back. But then the front door opens, and Thomas steps out onto the porch. He looks different from the man she met on the bench, clean-shaven, dressed in a tailored suit, his posture confident and commanding. For a split second, Sarah doesn't recognize him. Then their eyes meet, and realization dawns. Her jaw drops, and she freezes mid-step, clutching the strap of her purse tightly. "Sarah," Thomas says, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Thank you for coming," she blinks, struggling to process what's happening. What is this?" she stammers, gesturing vaguely at the mansion behind him. "Who are you?" Thomas hesitates, clearly aware of how surreal this must seem to her. "My name is Thomas Whitaker," he begins, choosing his words carefully, "and I owe you an explanation." He invites her inside, leading her through a grand foyer adorned with crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Every step feels surreal, as though she's stepped into another world entirely. They settle in a cozy sitting room, far removed from the ostentatious displays elsewhere in the house. Here, amidst soft lighting and plush furniture, Thomas finally reveals the truth. "I wasn't honest with you the other day," he admits, his gaze fixed firmly on hers. "When you gave me that money, I let you believe I was just another person in need. But the truth is, I'm not who you think I am." Sarah listens in stunned silence as Thomas explains everything: his former life as a millionaire CEO, the tragedy that shattered his family, his decision to abandon his wealth and live among strangers. He tells her about the years he spent wandering, observing humanity from the sidelines, searching for meaning in a world he once dominated. And he confesses that her act of kindness reignited something within him, a belief in the goodness of people, a reminder of the values he had long forgotten. "But why tell me all this now?" Sarah asks, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Why drag me here, to this palace? What do you want from me?" Thomas leans forward, his expression earnest. "I wanted to thank you properly," he says. "What you did for me, it wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, about seeing someone else's humanity, even when you didn't have to. That's rare, Sarah. Rarer than you know." Her frustration boils over. "So what? You're saying I'm special because I gave you $5? Do you have any idea what that cost me? My son needs medication, and I'm barely keeping my head above water. How does any of this help me?" Thomas flinches at her words, visibly shaken. He knows she's right. His wealth means nothing compared to the sacrifices she made, but instead of retreating, he presses on. "You're right," he says quietly. "Money alone won't fix your problems, but maybe it can. Start to ease the burden. Let me help you, Sarah. Not out of pity, but out of gratitude for reminding me of what truly matters." The camera lingers on Sarah's face as she processes his offer. Tears well up in her eyes, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of everything she's been carrying. For so long she's shouldered her burdens alone, convinced that asking for help was a sign of failure. But now, faced with this unexpected lifeline, she begins to wonder, is it possible to accept kindness without losing herself? Let's pause here for a moment. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever grappled with pride, vulnerability, or the fear of accepting help, consider subscribing to our channel. Stories like this remind us that strength isn't always about standing alone. Sometimes it's about letting others lift you up when you need it most. Hit that subscribe button now, and stay tuned as we explore the profound impact of this revelation on both Sarah and Thomas. After Thomas's heartfelt confession, Sarah sits in stunned silence, her mind racing as she tries to reconcile the man before her with the stranger on the bench. His offer of help, born out of gratitude for her selflessness, is undeniably generous, but it also stirs up conflicting emotions within her. Accepting his assistance feels like admitting defeat, as though all her hard work and sacrifices have been for nothing. Yet, at the same time, she can't deny the crushing weight of her circumstances or the toll they've taken on her family. The camera captures her internal struggle through close-ups of her face, her furrowed brow, the slight quiver of her lips, the way her hands clench and unclench in her lap. Finally, she speaks, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I don't want your charity," she says firmly, meeting Thomas's gaze. "I didn't give you that money expecting anything in return. If I accept this, whatever. It is your offering. It changes everything. It makes me complicit in something I don't fully understand." Thomas nods, respecting her hesitation. "You're right," he replies. "This isn't about charity. It's about partnership, about using what I have to make a difference, not just for you, but for people like you, people who are struggling silently, carrying burdens no one else sees." His words strike a chord deep within Sarah. She thinks back to her own childhood, to the kindness of the stranger who gave her $20 on that freezing winter night. That act had changed her life, teaching her the value of compassion and inspiring her to pay it forward. Could Thomas's wealth be used in the same way? Could it become a force for good rather than a source of guilt or regret? Still uncertain, Sarah agrees to hear him out, but only if he promises to involve her in the process. If we're going to do this, she insists, then it has to be real, no strings attached, and it has to come from both of us. Thomas smiles faintly, relief washing over him. For the first time in years, he feels a glimmer of hope, a sense that he might finally be able to redeem himself, not by erasing his past mistakes, but by building something meaningful in their wake. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Thomas collaborate closely to establish a foundation aimed at supporting families in vulnerable situations. They name it Ripple Effect, inspired by the idea that even the smallest acts of kindness can create lasting change. Together, they design programs focused on healthcare access, education, and financial literacy, drawing on Sarah's first-hand experience with hardship and Thomas's resources and business acumen. The camera follows them as they visit community centers, schools, and shelters, listening to stories of resilience and struggle. In one particularly poignant scene, Sarah meets a young mother named Maria, whose situation mirrors her own from years ago. Maria tearfully recounts how she's been forced to choose between paying rent and buying food for her children. As Sarah listens, tears well up in her eyes, not out of pity, but out of recognition. She knows exactly what Maria is going through, because she's lived it herself. Thomas watches from a distance, moved by Sarah's ability to connect with others on such a profound level. He realizes that while his money provides the means to help, it's Sarah's empathy and authenticity that give the foundation its soul. Without her, it would simply be another empty gesture, a band-aid over a gaping wound. But their partnership isn't without challenges. Sarah initially struggles with feelings of inadequacy, doubting whether she belongs in this world of privilege and influence. At one point, during a fundraising gala hosted at Thomas's mansion, she retreats to a quiet corner, overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding her. Thomas finds her there, sipping champagne alone, and sits beside her. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," he tells her gently. "Your strength isn't in pretending to be someone you're not. It's in being exactly who you are." His words resonate deeply, helping Sarah find her footing. Slowly but surely, she begins to embrace her role as co-founder of the foundation, speaking publicly about her journey and encouraging others to share their stories. Her authenticity inspires donors, volunteers, and beneficiaries alike, transforming Ripple Effect into a beacon of hope for the community. As the foundation gains momentum, Sarah discovers something that shakes her to her core. While reviewing financial documents related to Jake's medical bills, she notices a discrepancy. One of the invoices has been marked as paid in full. Confused, she contacts the hospital for clarification, only to learn that an anonymous donor covered the entire balance shortly after her encounter with Thomas. Her heart skips a beat as realization dawns. She confronts Thomas later that evening, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and gratitude. "Did you do this?" she demands, holding up the document. "Did you pay my son's medical bills?" Thomas hesitates, then nods. "Yes," he admits, "but I didn't tell you, because I didn't want it to feel like payment for what you did for me. I wanted it to be a gift, pure and simple." Sarah stares at him, torn between outrage and admiration. On one hand, she feels betrayed. This was her burden to bear, her responsibility. On the other hand, she can't deny the relief flooding through her, knowing that Jake's health is no longer hanging by a thread. After a long pause, she exhales sharply and shakes her head. "You should have told me," she says softly. "But thank you for giving me peace of mind when I needed it most." Their relationship shifts subtly after this moment. There's still tension, yes, but also a deeper understanding, a mutual respect forged through vulnerability and honesty. Word of Ripple Effect spreads rapidly, thanks in part to media coverage highlighting Sarah and Thomas's unlikely partnership. Their story captivates audiences across the country, sparking conversations about privilege, empathy, and the power of collaboration. Local news stations feature interviews with beneficiaries of the foundation, sharing testimonials about how it has transformed their lives. Social media platforms light up with hashtags like #SunPay It Forward and Small Acts Big Change, inspiring countless others to perform acts of kindness in their own communities. In one memorable scene, Sarah and Thomas stand side by side at a press conference, addressing a crowd of reporters and supporters. Sarah speaks first, her voice strong and unwavering. "This foundation isn't about us," she says. "It's about everyone who believes in the goodness of humanity. It's about proving that even in a world that often feels divided, we can still come together to lift each other up." When it's Thomas's turn to speak, he looks directly into the camera, his expression raw and unguarded. "I spent most of my life chasing success, thinking it would bring me happiness. But it wasn't until I lost everything and found myself sitting on a park bench that I truly understood what matters. Kindness, connection, purpose. Those are the things that define us, not the size of our bank accounts." The camera pans across the audience, capturing faces filled with emotion, tears, smiles, nods of agreement. It's clear that their message is resonating, touching hearts and minds in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Months have passed since the launch of Ripple Effect, and the foundation has grown beyond anything Sarah or Thomas could have imagined. What began as a small initiative born out of a single act of kindness has blossomed into a nationwide movement, touching the lives of thousands. Families struggling to make ends meet now have access to affordable health care. Children once trapped in cycles of poverty are receiving scholarships to attend school. Communities fractured by hardship are coming together, united by a shared vision of hope. But for Sarah and Thomas, the true measure of success lies not in the numbers or accolades, but in the personal transformations they've witnessed along the way. They have seen mothers regain their confidence after years of feeling invisible, fathers return to work with renewed purpose, knowing their efforts will provide for their families. Teenagers dream bigger than they ever thought possible, inspired by mentors who believe in their potential. One such moment occurs during a community event hosted by the foundation. Sarah stands at the edge of a playground, watching as children laugh and play under the warm afternoon sun. Among them is Jake, her son, whose asthma treatments are finally under control thanks to the foundation's medical program. He runs alongside, his friends, his laughter ringing out like music. For the first time in years, Sarah feels a sense of peace, a quiet assurance that she's done right by him. Nearby, Thomas watches the scene unfold, his expression softening as he observes the joy radiating from the crowd. He thinks back to the days when he wandered aimlessly, searching for meaning in a world he no longer understood. Now, standing here amidst the very people he once overlooked, he realizes he's found what he was looking for all along: redemption. Not through grand gestures or extravagant displays, but through the simple act of showing up, of listening, learning, and giving back. The camera captures a tender moment between Sarah and Thomas as they stand side by side, gazing out at the bustling activity around them. Without words, they exchange a glance filled with mutual respect and gratitude. Neither of them could have predicted how their paths would intersect or how profoundly they would impact each other's lives, but they wouldn't trade this journey for anything. As the day winds down, Sarah and Thomas retreat to a quiet corner of the park, sitting together on a bench, much like the one where they first met. The irony isn't lost on either of them. It's as if fate has come full circle, bringing them back to the place where it all began. "I never thought I'd end up here," Sarah says softly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "When I gave you that money, I didn't expect any of this." Thomas smiles faintly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Neither did I," he admits. "I thought I had nothing left to give. But you reminded me that even when we feel broken, we still have the power to make a difference." Sarah nods, her thoughts drifting to the countless lives they've touched through the foundation. "Do you think we're making a dent?" she asks, her voice tinged with both hope and uncertainty. "Or are we just scratching the surface?" Thomas considers her question carefully before responding. "Maybe it's both," he says. "The problems we're facing, they're big, bigger than either of us could ever solve alone. But every life we touch, every person we help, that matters. It creates a ripple, just like you said, and who knows how far those ripples might go. His words resonate deeply, offering Sarah a sense of perspective she desperately needed. She realizes that while they may never eradicate poverty or suffering entirely, their efforts are planting seeds of change, seeds that will grow and spread long after they're gone. Years later, the impact of ripple effect continues to reverberate across generations. The foundation expands globally, partnering with organizations worldwide to tackle issues ranging from climate justice to educational equity. Sarah becomes a celebrated advocate for social change, traveling the world to share her story and inspire others to take action. Thomas, meanwhile, dedicates himself to mentoring young entrepreneurs, teaching them the importance of using their resources for good. Their partnership evolves over time, transitioning from collaborators to lifelong friends. Though they occasionally disagree, after all, their perspectives remain shaped by vastly different experiences. They always find common ground in their shared mission. Together they prove that meaningful change requires more than just resources. It demands empathy, humility, and an unwavering commitment to humanity. In one of the final scenes, the camera pans across a mural painted on the side of a building in Sarah's hometown. The artwork depicts two figures, a woman handing a crumpled bill to a man seated on a bench, surrounded by vibrant waves symbolizing ripples spreading outward. Beneath the image, a quote reads, "True wealth is measured not by what we possess, but by the connections we create." As the camera lingers on the mural, the screen fades to black, and the narrator's voice returns one last time to deliver the closing message. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can set off a chain reaction, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand. Sarah and Thomas remind us that no matter where we come from or what we've been through, we all have the power to leave the world better than we found it. So ask yourself, what will your ripple be before the May? Credits roll, the screen displays a simple yet powerful message. Inspired by this story? Join the movement. Perform an act of kindness today and watch as it creates ripples of its own. Below the text, viewers are encouraged to subscribe to the channel, follow the Foundation's social media pages, and share their own stories of generosity using the hashtag Ripple Effect. This concludes the story of She Gave Him Money for the Bus, Not Knowing He Was a Millionaire. It's a tale of resilience, redemption, and the transformative power of human connection. A reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is always light to be found.